welcome to the new food chain from land to mouth during COVID. So, good evening. My name is Diane Welland. I'm Dom Diane, and I'm your moderator for this evening's webinar. So, I'm a member of La Dames des Escoffiers. This is a philanthropic organization of women leaders in the fields of food, fine beverage, and hospitality. And in our DC chapter, our members are restaurateurs, chefs, caterers, food writers, and photographers, winery owners and wine experts, public relations consultants, and nutritionists. And we represent just about every aspect of the food, beverage, and hospitality industries. So I'm so glad you can join us tonight, so that we can talk about new behaviors and attitudes related to the COVID pandemic. So we've tapped into some of the talents of our members to create these free webinars, all exploring some aspect of the food industry. So we're very happy that you can join us. So just a couple of housekeeping tips. So we want this to be very conversational and a discussion. So feel free to jump in at any time. Feel free to interrupt us, or just kind of if you have any comments, if you have any questions. I want to call your attention to two buttons at the bottom. One is a Q&A and the other is a chat button. So I think if you have anything specific to the speakers and what they're talking about, you can put it in the Q&A. So I'll be monitoring that, but there's also the chat side as well. And just a little bit of the logistics. So I'm going to introduce all of the speakers, and then I will do a brief PowerPoint slide presentation, followed by Debra and then Sandra. And then we will have a discussion. So again, feel free to jump in at any time. So again, we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's transformed the way we shop, the way we eat, the way we think about food. So not only have consumers changed, but companies and food suppliers have changed as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Diane Welland. I'm a registered dietitian and nutritionist. I'm also a public relations specialist. I work for an association management firm called Kellen Company in Washington, D.C. So I work with a number of food accounts. Some of my accounts are the National Pasta Association and National Pecan Shellers Association and the Juice Products Association. Prior to that, I was a food writer. I wrote for a number of publications and blogs, and food and culinary oriented, and also nutrition oriented articles as well. And I'm also the author of 4 books, Complete Idiot's Guides books. And then our second speaker will be Debra Moser, and her husband, Mitchell Berliner, co-founded the Central Farm Markets and MeatCrafters, Inc. Central Farm Markets has grown into 3 Washington area farmers markets, serving thousands since 2008. And giving over 100 vendors an outlet for farmers and artisan farm producers to sell their products each year. MeatCrafters is an artisan meat company producing naturally cured sausages, salamis, and other charcuterie products. And our third speaker is Sandra K. Miller. For over 30 years, Sandra K. Miller has been at the forefront of the local foods movement, with hands-on endeavors in grocery, restaurant, policy, writing, teaching, and farming. Since 2000, she has owned and operated Painted Hand Farm, a diversified grass-based livestock operation in South Central Pennsylvania. So let's get started. So year 2020 has been a year unlike any other year. As you know, the pandemic hit in March, and virtually overnight things changed. My office closed down in a day. They just said, gather up your things and leave, and we don't know when you're coming back. And that was over 8 months ago, and we still haven't been back, and we don't expect to be back. So food service operations closed, restaurants, cafeterias, large events, these things shifted overnight. But as a result, there's been a lot of changes in the way people have been buying foods and thinking about foods. So some of the things that have changed with this new environment, obviously more people are eating at home. There's fewer trips to the grocery store. And even when you do go to the grocery store, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, you can't find the items that you want. So there were shrinking choices on the shelves. And there was actually two reasons for those shrinking choices. One was panic buying and stockpiling. And the other is because the manufacturers weren't able to keep up with the demand. So for example, flour was something that we didn't have a shortage of flour, but we just couldn't keep the flour on the shelves because people started baking, stress baking, all this uncertainty and all this change. Lots of things changed. There was also a boom in online purchases. Obviously, people couldn't get what they wanted at the store, so they turned to looking online for things that they wanted to purchase. And they also turned to local markets as well, because we're going to talk a lot about local markets and why people are turning to them. They feel more safe and secure, and also, what they're looking for with that. So as time went by, some of the panic buying and some of the stockpiling slowed down a little bit. And I know the other speakers are going to talk more about what they've seen, because although it's kind of slowed down since March and April, it hasn't gone away completely. I don't think it ever will. And people are still buying lots of food. They're buying differently. There's an increased interest in health and the healthfulness of food, especially related to immunity. But there's also this craving for comfort foods, for foods that they're familiar with, the foods that they like. But at the same time, they're not going to restaurants anymore. So they're not getting the foods that they were used to getting at restaurants. And so there's a bit of a dichotomy in some of these things because, so for example, a lot of people used to buy seafood in restaurants, right? Well, now they're not going to restaurants anymore, so they're going to have to figure out where they're going to get their seafood from and how they're going to cook it. There's also an interest in plant-based foods and proteins. And by proteins, I mean, meats and things like that. Debra's going to talk a little bit more about that. But the interest in plant-based foods, for sure, may be related to healthfulness. But this was also a trend that was happening way before the pandemic. So it's just kind of been intensified and amplified. And then, of course, there's budget consciousness and indulgence. And that, again, while those may seem opposite, they're a direct result of the pandemic. The budget consciousness, or for the many people who may be watching their dollars now, who aren't on, who may not have a job or may have lost their job. But at the same time, then you've got a lot of people aren't spending like they used to. And so they may have some extra cash around. And so they want the things that they missed or the things that they aren't getting anymore. So there's this indulgent side of it. And I know you've seen that, right, Sandra and Debra? Debra, you can unmute.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that. Yeah, there has been a great increase in a lot of different buying, and both Sandra and I, Sandra's at our markets, and we've seen some interesting shifts in buying patterns, and we'll go into that a little bit more.
And do they fit any of these do they fit some of these trends that these are kind of like the broad strokes trends? Do they fit them, some of them?
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of things. For example, the flour. We actually had a vendor at one of our markets that brought in locally milled flour, and when people found out about it, of course, it sold out quite quickly, and she had a whole week. And then we did partner. We have fishmongers at our markets, and when they lost their restaurant business, a lot of them service the restaurants, as you said. They came to the markets, and they've been at the markets, but their sales went through the roof. So
Yeah.
interesting buying.
And it's really interesting is sometimes you could make like, I wouldn't say that they can make up totally for all, the surge in retail. But depending on what kind of product this is, some companies or some foods actually have made it up. And the one that I was thinking of, pasta over here, I work with the Pasta Association, and their retail sales are booming big time. But one that I read about, which I thought was really interesting, is butter. Butter sales grew so much that in the year 2020, now typically in a year like this, where we had the shutdowns, you wouldn't see growth in this year because of the offsets from the food service area. You may see growth in 2021 because they expect a lot of these trends to kind of keep on going for the next year. But butter is seen already a plus 20% growth in 2020. So that means not only did it offset all the food service, that the retail sales not only offset the food service sales that it lost, it also grew 20% above and beyond that. And I find that amazing because food service uses a ton of butter, a ton. So there must be a ton of people baking with butter that didn't used to bake before or didn't used to use butter before. So I thought that's
Well,
kind of,
there are so many people that are at home right now that not only do they have themselves at home, they have their children at home. Some of them have their elderly parents at home. And it's also about the sheer number of people in the households now.
right.
Right, right. And think about it, cooking 3 meals a day. And you do use a lot of, whether it's olive oil or butter or,
Mm-hmm.
so and we're seeing a lot of that. Just the uptick in the condiment side of things because of the cooking, the increase in cooking.
Yeah. So so now, again, a lot of people have turned to locally grown foods and markets for a number of reasons. So Deb's going to talk about the farmers markets. I wanted to just mention community supported agriculture, but also Sandra's going to talk about direct from farmer, or actually we're all going to talk about these things, direct from rancher, U-Picks, all of these things. Although they may have seen maybe a slight decline in the beginning of the pandemic, when there was still so much uncertainty going on. Now that things have kind of, continued, and they call it like the new normal, like, people are becoming accustomed to this now, they're kind of adjusting, then, these things have really grown. So I wanted just to talk about one of them, and that's the community supported agriculture, just to tell you a little bit more about what these things are. Yeah, someone commented that they couldn't find yeast, which is interesting as well. But yeast is one of those products that just, they couldn't stay on the shelf. It just couldn't stay on the shelf. So because of this stress baking. But let me tell you what a community supported agriculture is. It's you basically are buying a share of the farm. Usually it's produce, but not necessarily. You could buy chickens that way. You could buy meat that way as well. But you actually have to buy it. Usually you'll buy it like in January, February. You're buying a piece of the farm. You're sort of investing in the farm. So you give the farmer what he needs in order to grow the food that he needs. And so it's kind of a piece of the pie. So that's why the kinds of things that you get, the produce that you get varies depending on the quantities vary and the items vary depending on what kind of farmer you have. I actually have a CSA that's a co-op, and it's in Pennsylvania. And so it's not just one farm. So no, it could be just one farm. It could be a group of farmers. It could be, a large network of farmers. They have a lot of different types now. It's grown so much in popularity. Usually there's a payment plan where you pay everything up front. Generally, it's based on a time period. So mine is like 26 weeks, and it ranges anywhere from, like, depending on what size you get, what size box you get. See, that's a box size. I get a medium, but there's small, there's medium, there's large. And depending on how big your family is or how much you want. And then that depends on, it's anywhere from like $300 or $400 to $500, $600, $700, depending, again, if it's 20 weeks or 25 weeks or 26 weeks. And now there's fall, it's not just during the summer. You can do it all year long. And there's even CSAs now that you can buy, week by week. Usually it's like between $25 and $30 a box, again, depending on what size the box is. And there's weekly deliveries. The reason why this has been so popular is that the deliveries could be delivered straight to your door, or they could be delivered at like a central area. Like mine is at someone's house that's nearby, that's a local house, and it's in the garage, and we just pick it up. I just pick it up once a week in the garage, and that's it. And then, every week you go there. So, but there's ones that it could be delivered straight to your door as well. So there's all different kinds. And again, you could get, I think, some cheeses, you could get bread. Mine is just produce, but you can also get fruit ones. You could get, I did have a CSA once where it was a combination fruit and vegetables. So it's just another way of, buying local. And a lot of people who have CSAs also go to farmers markets and also go to U-Picks and do that kind of thing, because usually, people do all of those things. Okay, let me check on the chat. Oh, there's a few people who belong to a CSA. Okay. All right. So, Deb, why don't you start now, and you could
Okay.
start yours. So what I'll do is,
You want to throw the slides up?
yep,
Okay.
I'll bring the slides up. I'll just go to my next one, and just in case, if anyone's interested, this is the Eating Local book. But I'm going to stop sharing, actually. I'm going to bring yours.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you, Diane, and hi to Sandra. As I said before, Sandra and I work together both at Central Farm Markets and on some other things in life. I'll talk a little bit about Central Farm Markets and MeatCrafters. They are both interconnected. When we started the farm markets, we started MeatCrafters at the same time. And we used the farm markets, actually became an outpost for MeatCrafters. We had a stand there and it became our testing ground. It was probably our best testing of our products. So I like to think of the farm markets as incubators. We've incubated a lot of businesses, and it happened to us as well. Okay, next slide. So two things happened. Because we run two businesses, we got hit doubly when the COVID hit. Our USDA plant for MeatCrafters had to go on a lockdown. And that meant nobody could come in the plant except our staff and our USDA inspector. So anybody else, any deliveries, everything had to be done outside. We don't allow any tours of the plant anymore, and we're under severe COVID restrictions. One of the things that happened, as you can imagine, and you've heard about this, is we lost our restaurant business. We do a lot of custom work for a lot of restaurants and chefs that you probably have heard of and may know. And of course, those dried up immediately overnight. So what we had to do is we had transitioned to online ordering about a week before COVID hit. And when COVID hit and everything went on a lockdown, the distributors to restaurants also went into a shutdown. They had no restaurants to distribute to. So we started to partner with those, and we started partnering with the distributors to distribute direct to consumer. And so what we all had in warehouses and what we were all making for restaurants and for retail stores, the retail stores were booming. We were getting orders for cases and cases of sausages and things. We partnered with the distributors to try to keep them afloat as well. So what we saw was this initial, and I know Sandra saw it at the market too, we saw it at the markets, this initial panic buying and hoarding of meat.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I could not believe how much meat people were buying, but I know my customers, and I saw where customers had grown children come home to live with them, parents come to live with them. They were not going to work anymore. They were not traveling for business anymore. So again, you're cooking 3 meals a day. You go from a 2-person household to a 6 or an 8-person household that's at home all the time cooking. You need to buy your food from somewhere.
Right, right. And we saw it both in meat crafters and at the markets. And the panic buying at the markets was unreal, because we saw stands being wiped out early on. And I would talk to the vendors and they would say, I'm out of eggs at 9:30 in the morning. People were buying 6, 8 dozen of eggs. And it was really astounding to watch this. So let's go to the next slide. And so at the market, it really became critical because we were deemed essential by the governor in Maryland, and we were deemed essential eventually by the governor of Virginia. We do run one Virginia market. So we immediately had to implement the COVID protocols. It is very difficult to change your business and 2 businesses at once and have to put in protocols and start policing. And that's basically what we had to do. And it was difficult because we were working with many vendors at the markets. And so all of the vendors had to go into protocols, and we had to get our customers educated. We even had to move one of our markets when the Virginia school system shut down. They wouldn't let us stay. When the Maryland school system shut down, we had a very special relationship with Montgomery County, and they said, nope, you're essential for food. We're going to let you stay on the school property and continue to operate. Virginia, we weren't so lucky, but we did have a church step up and say, we want you to come. We know this is important because people need to get food. So we had to transition people into new ways of shopping almost overnight. And if we go to the next slide, I'll show you how we did that. So we implemented, we had 3 ways, and the Stone Gardens is just an example of pre-order pickup at the markets, but we had our home delivery service. We implemented a home delivery service, and at the same time had to build a back-end system to accommodate that pre-ordering system. We used something that we cobbled together until our back-end system, and it's very robust, and it handles our delivery service, which works every Sunday. You can order Monday through Thursday, and then every Sunday. We were fortunate that one of our vendors, it's one of our fishmongers, our fish vendors, had the trucks, and we partnered with them, and they do the deliveries and we do the orders. Everything's put together at the market, and people order and they get the orders online. Direct to their door. Even though this summer people came out more to the markets, we still had a great faction of people that are not coming out and that want home delivery. Then we implemented curbside pickup. So you can pre-order from all of our vendors and go to the order from them. They'll have your orders ready, come to the markets, and we hired people to run the orders to the cars. So it meant new equipment, wagons and things like that, new hirings for people. We had to implement traffic patterns so that people knew where to go for parking, where to go for pickup, and it's contactless pickup. It gets put into your car. And then, of course, the third way is you still can come to the market and buy, but we do have lines. We have mask requirements. We only let a certain number of people in at a time. In the beginning, we only let one person from a family in. We've expanded that a little bit. And so those are the three ways that you can shop at our markets. And go to the next slide. And these are the
Yeah, but
things.
I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Did you notice that, like, have you ever had to like turn people away
In terms of?
because of COVID, or there's too many people there or anything like that?
We didn't turn them away because of too many people. I will tell you, between the lines that we had, and sometimes, especially in Bethesda, they would go 2 or 3 blocks. But you have to remember, people are 6 feet. We're trying to keep them 6 feet apart. The only time we will turn you away, if you want to stand in line and come in, is if you're not wearing a mask. Or you try to bring an animal into the market. We used to allow dogs. We don't allow those anymore. So we will turn you away if you come and you're not wearing a mask, or you didn't want to. There are other places maybe you can shop. I don't know of any that you can't go in without a mask. But we learned we had to think outside of the box. We had to move very quickly. We're a small organization. We have my husband and myself and one other person running the organization. So when we had to make decisions, it was go. So we had to be flexible. We had to work with the vendors. We did have a couple of vendors that left our markets because they refused to wear masks, even though they were mandated by the states at some point. So we had to part ways with them, which was not easy. It's not easy when you have people that you enjoy working with, but they didn't want to wear masks.
Well, I'd like to say something to you, Deb, as well as everybody else, is that's one of the reasons I've continued to come to market is I feel safe going to market. My fellow vendors wear masks, my customers wear masks. It's not just for the customers, but actually for the farmers themselves.
Right.
We literally cannot afford to get sick. And it's not so much even about the money at times, it's about actually making our farms run. So yes, we absolutely appreciate the fact that COVID protocols were put in place and were held to a standard.
Yeah, and it's educating your consumers and your staff and your vendors. And we had to keep those businesses going. It wasn't for us, it was for all of our vendors. And we were panicked. I will be honest with you, we were panicked in the beginning. We didn't know what was going to happen. We did have some vendors that in the beginning wouldn't come out. Maybe they had somebody at home that had a compromised immune system, or they had an elderly adult living with them. So we didn't know what was going to happen. Fortunately, it has turned out well. And like Sandra said, everybody adheres to the protocols, and knock on wood, everybody has stayed healthy. And then the last thing is, and I say this as somebody who really runs a tight ship financially on our businesses, you have to have money behind you for some emergencies like this. We had to, and we planned for emergencies, not this big an emergency, but we did plan for it because we had to buy new equipment, new signage, back-end system for the home delivery. Those are quite expensive things, new staff. So we had to really, look at a whole new business model and decide and understand that it was going to go on for quite some time. So those are kind of, how we've operated. And we see things, as I said before, we saw panic buying. We're starting to see it a little bit again. And we've noticed it at MeatCrafters. Our sales are going up again. Now, part of that might be holiday time. We don't know how many families are going to be expanding their holidays. We hope people will be safe and smart, but we're seeing our meat sales go up again. And we're starting to see it again at the market as they start to talk about hunkering down for the winter. We're seeing people start to buy more, and we're seeing them buy comfort food, a lot of comfort food. We have a lot of chefs that who are out of work, who have started little businesses, pasta businesses, to-go food, dinners to go. We have quite a number of those. So we're seeing things shift dramatically as the winter closes in on us. And Sandra probably can speak more as to what she sees with her customers and her purchases.
I think it's interesting about the rainy day fund for emergencies, because that kind of mirrors what has happened in the general population as well, that a lot of people have realized the importance of having some money set aside for emergencies that maybe they didn't have before. So in the general population, a lot of people are thinking along those lines when they weren't before. They were just kind of spending and going out and going to restaurants, however, 3 or 4 times a week, and not really thinking about saving. But now that, emergencies come up, they save as well. So that kind of mirrors the general population. So I think it's interesting, and it's really important for people who have businesses to recognize and realize that anything can happen at any time.
Right. So,
Sandra, do you want to jump in, or
I can jump in. Yeah, I've seen a lot of changes just in the last few weeks. I've noticed that people, rather than purchasing 1 or 2 packages, they're now bumping it up to 6, 8, and 10 packages at a time. That's for storage, for planning ahead. Other things that I've noticed, and like Diane, you had mentioned, comfort foods and luxury items. People are not going out to eat as much as they are anymore. So they're coming and they're purchasing things that they might normally eat at a restaurant, and are experimenting with cooking those things in-house because they're things that they enjoyed.
And I know specifically for pasta, we've seen a huge bump in pasta for a couple of reasons. One, because it's so easy to cook. Second, it's inexpensive. But third, too, a lot of people used to buy, sort of high-end pastas like those tortellinis and things like that in restaurants, and now they're not doing that anymore. So now they're learning how to make, carbonara. They're learning how to make dishes that they would typically not even have bothered to learn how, just bought them out. Now they're making them at home.
and
So,
that,
Diane, somebody just mentioned about freezers are hard to come by. And,
yes.
yeah.
I want to tell you, watch Craigslist. People are still moving, as Deb knows. They're not taking their freezers with them, or they want to upgrade. Yeah, watch Craigslist, and or look outside of your local area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I just saw, I'll just pass this along. Home Depot has little, like 7-foot freezers on sale right now. So if you need one, get one, because they are going to go fast.
And they fit in your closet.
They fit in your closet. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are still going to continue to do that. We know that, so if they had 1 or 2 boxes of pasta on the shelf, now they're going to have 3 or 4. And we've even seen it in the juice industry, that people are stockpiling juice, whereas before they only maybe had 1 bottle of juice in their house. Now they have 2 or 3 bottles, and they're going to keep them there. But again, they've got more people in the house. Like you said, people are now home, and they're feeding college students that used to be away. They're feeding their kids now 3 meals a day, whereas they used to go to school. And so in fact, one of the one of the areas that's grown the most is breakfast foods. People used to either skip breakfast or buy breakfast at work, or, not just like not make breakfast at home. And now everyone's been making breakfast at home. So
I have customers that were strictly 1 dozen eggs a week, and now they're up to 2 and 3.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you want me to go on to yours, Sandra?
Sure.
Okay. Let me stop sharing. Um, Okay.
All right. Well, one of the things that I noticed as the pandemic hit was people wanted to stock up flat out. And what happened in the beginning was, and a lot of people don't take our food system for granted, they didn't realize the impact that we had almost 35 major processing plants in the United States shut down. And these are plants that kill 20,000 beef a day that were shut down for months. Plants that kill 40,000 hogs a day. They were shut down. So, of course, we started seeing a shortage in the grocery stores of the meats that we normally buy, of eggs, of bacon, of hamburger. And then what we saw were the prices going up, far beyond what people have seen in years. And I noticed a lot of my customers were coming to me and saying, hey, how can I protect myself against this? So there are definitely shifts in how we are purchasing meat these days. And you can go ahead and switch to the next slide. So people want to know, how do they buy direct from a farmer? And over the last 6-7 months, I have seen more new customers than I have ever seen before at the markets. And I've been doing markets for almost 20 years now in South Central Pennsylvania, in the Mid-Atlantic region. And people often say, how can I ensure my food supply? So the best thing you can do is find a farmer, because in the beginning of this, I really struggled with, how do I make sure my customers who have been with me every single week, who have followed me from market to market, who have patronized me through, in the heat of summer, in the dead of winter, how did I make sure they got first? And that was difficult, because in the first few weeks of the pandemic, I had to put out messages to my customers and say, hey, listen, if you really want your eggs, you need to pre-order now. And there were some weeks I went to the market where I only had 3 and 9 dozen to sell publicly, and they were gone in the first few minutes of the market. And it was really difficult for me. I felt bad. So I really want to encourage people to create a relationship with a farmer to ensure your food supply. And so people often ask me, how do you find a farmer? Well, the first thing you're going to do is you need to talk to your friends, find out where they get their food. Do they have a farmer like you, Diane? Do they have a CSA that they belong to? A lot of CSAs will do things like refer a friend. And that's one way to get into a localized food system. Again, go to the farmer's market. That's the best way. And not all farmers go to farmers markets. So or you may have specifications that you want, say you want specifically grass-fed products. You were going to want to go to an agricultural organization or an online directory for that. There are two great organizations in the Mid-Atlantic region. One is Future Harvest, that covers Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia, and Maryland. And then there's the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture that basically covers like Pennsylvania, New York, surrounding states. And a lot of these organizations have very detailed directories that you can log into and find farmers in your area, what they sell, what their seasons are, and how to get in touch with them. So the best way to ensure your food supply, not just in times of pandemic, but at all times, is to develop a relationship with your farmer. Because when you create that relationship, it goes both ways. You know, I do so much for my customers because they become like family to me. Throughout the pandemic, I have had several customers contact me and say, hey, we're COVID positive. We're not coming to the farmer's market. How can we get food from you? I explained to them that you can come to the market and do a pickup, a curbside. We have a delivery service. And I've even gone to people's houses and dropped stuff off on their front porch. I mean, it is a two-way relationship, and it's one that is very worthy of cultivating if you want to continue to have a food supply whenever there's a crisis. So next slide. So once you find a farmer, I know a lot of people talk about buying halves and whole carcasses and split quarters and things like that. And, you know, I often say to people, well, what do you want to cook? How do you cook? What are you looking for? What do you want to buy? And when we start this conversation, you know, I find out that, hey, we've got 6 people in our household and we'd really like to have roasts and larger cuts of meat and bigger bags. And these are things that you don't see in a grocery store, that whenever you buy direct from a farmer, especially with meat, and I'm going to speak specifically about meat right now, is that you are given the control over how you want your meat cut and how you want it packaged. And we have been spoon-fed meat cuts and packaging through the industrial meat system for the last 50 years that people don't even think to ask about these things anymore. For instance, I've had a couple families that they like to go in and they like to buy a whole pig. And you think about that and you think, well, what all can I make out of these? And you start giving them the options and they realize, wow, this is a lot of different things. And, you know, I try to explain to people, hey, you know, out of half of that animal, you could have, instead of pork chops, you could have a standing pork roast for your holiday meal and then make the other half pork chops. Or if you want to have special sausages made. Some people are even getting into the point to where they want to cut up their own animals. So here's how you have to ask, how are they sold? And there's a couple different ways animals can be sold, other than just, you know, going to the farmer's market or going to custom butcher shop, like a boutique butcher shop, and having cut exactly what you want. for a lot of smaller animals, they're sold by live weight, like lambs and goats. Pigs and cows tend to be sold by hanging weight. I prefer to sell by what's called delivered weight, and that's where my customers only pay for what's delivered to them. Uh, there's a lot of education that goes into learning how to purchase whole animals at a time. And a lot of people think, I could never eat a whole animal. And whenever you break it down into individual meals, for instance, say you like lamb and you buy a whole lamb. Whole lambs tend to be anywhere between 60 and 90 pounds live weight. You lose about half of that in the processing. So you could be looking at as little as 25 pounds worth of meat in a whole animal. And you part that out into specific meals, that's having a lamb meal every other week. And that's perfectly acceptable in some families. So you want to look at how different things are being sold. Now, right now, for everyone who wants to do these things, there is a backup in USDA processors, and there's a way around that. Whenever you purchase a whole animal, you can go through custom processors. A lot of places will do both. Some only do custom. That's whenever you get into speaking with a butcher and how to cut up animals, how to have them packaged for you. Are they packaged in-house? Do you take it somewhere else to cut and wrap it? And one of the things that I have been seeing that I think is really cool right now is that restaurants who have either had reduced business or shut down are helping people to cut and wrap their own animals. So that's a new option that's just emerging. Go ahead, change. Next slide.
I have a question for you, Sandra. How do you know it's live weight, hanging weight, or delivered weight? Does the farmer automatically tell you? Because
you have to communicate with your farmer.
Because I remember talking to a farmer once and asking about, pork pigs. And he was just like, well, it's 350 pounds or it's 300 pounds. And that's all he told me. He didn't say if that was the weight of the pig. Does that include everything? It's just like, I didn't know.
That's a communication issue. You have to learn the questions to ask. A 350-pound pig's a big pig.
Mm-hmm.
And that would probably translate into a carcass of about 300 pounds. And then once you start taking the bones out, you may be looking at 250 pounds of meat altogether.
Mm-hmm.
That's 20 pounds of bacon. That's, depending on how you cut them, probably 40 pork chops. That's 2 huge hams. That's large shoulders.
So what's the difference between live weight and hanging weight again?
About 50%. Live weight is what the animal weighs when it walks across the scale going into the slaughterhouse. And that's something that I'm not a big believer in, because animals can have a lot of meat or a lot of food in their stomachs that you're not going to get.
So if an animal weighed, just for the heck of it, 100 pounds as live weight, then you would most likely only get like 50 pounds.
You may even only get 40 or 30 pounds, depending on how much was in their stomachs.
Okay.
So next slide. So some of the pitfalls you want to avoid when you're buying meat for the pandemic, whether you're buying whole animals, half animals, quarter animals, or going to your local farmer's market, grocery store, whenever, stocking up, is having enough freezer space. And I think we touched on this earlier, is and one of our participants said that finding freezers right now is difficult. Look around. You have to do your homework. You have to find them. They're on Craigslist. Deb mentioned Home Depot having smaller ones. And what I suggest is, like, my ideal size freezer is about 14 cubic feet for a family. You can put a half a beef, a whole pig, a lamb or a goat, and a couple chickens, and also fruits and vegetables in it. I mean, it's just a very good investment. And today's energy efficient freezers only use between $4 and $6 worth of energy a month. So an investment in a freezer is a very good idea. You want it to be a deep freeze that doesn't have what they call automatic defrost, because what happens when you have automatic defrost is the temperature fluctuates to prevent that frost buildup, and that can compromise the quality of your meat. So the next thing, if you're having your own animals cut up, is to learn what a cut sheet is and communicating with a butcher. And what I learned, I spent 20 years living in California before I moved home to farm. And what we called meat in California, certain cuts were completely different within the East Coast. So you want to be very specific whenever you communicate with a butcher. And it's simple things like if you're having sausage made, and ask them, what are in your sausage mixes? Is there any added silica to avoid caking? Is there any added gluten products to avoid caking? Some people are gluten intolerant and don't want those in their products. You need to ask. The next thing is how it's packed. I was speaking with a lady who had purchased a pig, and when it arrived in waxed butcher paper, not vacuum sealed like what she's used to from either the farmer's market or the grocery store. And you need to ask, do they seal in cryo pack versus waxed butcher paper? And cryo packing can give your meat a 2-year lifespan in a deep freeze. There is no degradation in quality when meats are vacuum sealed in a cryo pack. But with waxed butcher paper, you're looking at 2 to 4 months maximum. So let's see what else. Oh, splitting carcass with friends and family. Pardon me?
So it's important to know how they're packed and where they come from, because we only have like about another 5 more minutes left.
Okay.
Per hour. So what's the most important point you would think, Sandra?
The most important point at this point, I think, is having enough freezer space, because the last thing you want to do is get meat home and realize it does not fit in your freezer.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Have you seen, Deborah, have you seen people buying different things? I know they're buying more comfort foods, but like sausages in particular, has that, like, compared to other different cuts of meat?
And I think that we see it with all of the, not only at MeatCrafters, but Sandra and other people, their sausage consumption or sales have gone up. We're seeing it with a lot of our charcuterie products. People have gotten in, how they got into baking sourdough bread and it became a thing. They're also making charcuterie boards, and they're doing a lot of it. And we have a lot of people that are online, and there's a competition who makes the best charcuterie board. So we're seeing a lot of purchase of our things like duck breast prosciutto and our lomo and things like that, things that are a little bit of a luxury brand. So we're seeing more uptick in that too, but mostly I would say the sausage sales are off the wall because they're so versatile and there's so many things you can do, you know, soups, stews, all sorts of things.
Same way with just plain ground meat.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you too, is there's a lot of people who must be looking to you for recipes or different ways of preparing some of these things, especially if they're trying out new things, like maybe certain fish that they are not accustomed to doing, or even things like, you know, even sausages, which are a little bit easier to deal with. So is there,
I've been providing recipes to my customers for 20 years.
Yeah.
They
So
come,
you have a-
they come and I provide recipes. I've even had other vendors send their customers to me to tell me how to cook something, which I will gladly do.
do you have a place for, do either of you have places where you have recipes and things like that, that maybe people could visit?
We have a weekly newsletter that goes out. We often post recipes in that. Sandra is our blogger for the weekly newsletter, and she writes a phenomenal blog. I mean, she gets into all aspects of farming and politics of farming and all sorts of things, but often includes a recipe along as well. So there are a lot of online shows. We have some local chefs that do online demos, and you can learn to cook new things. And so there's a lot of resources out there, but
Is that on your Facebook page, Deborah, or where is that?
we have some on our Facebook, but if you go to our website, centralfarmmarkets.com, you can sign up for our newsletter. You have to read Sandra's blog. She's in the thick and thin of everything. And it's always timely and it's always appropriate for what's going on in the world. So I encourage you to read her blogs.
Great. So that's centralfarmersmarket.org.
Centralfarmmarkets, plural.com.
Centralfarmmarketsplural.com.
Yeah.
Good. Great. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? I know we have about 2 minutes left. Is there any burning question that anyone wants to ask the group?
I think there was a question from Karen. How can we avoid choosing an undesirable farmer or rancher? Sandra, I'll let you take that one.
I hate to say this, but talk to the other vendors.
That's true.
We know. And, you know, it depends on really what you want. Sometimes it's hit or miss. Somebody just asked about how long meat lasts in a freezer. Oh, if you're cryopacked, vacuum sealed, cryopacked and flash frozen, you're good for 2 years.
What about if you just wrap it yourself in, you know, plastic wrap or whatever and put it in there? How long?
2 to 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then
And defrosting?
Yeah.
Defrosting, either stick it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it, usually overnight, sometimes as much as 2 days, depending on the size of the cut. If it's a big turkey, depend on a week. But I'm a big fan of throwing it in some warm water and cooking it as soon as it thaws out.
We tell people to do that too with the MeatCrafters products, which if you get them at the farm market, you'll just take them home. You can either throw them in the fridge or start defrosting them. If you get them when we ship them out, they're shipped on dry ice. So they come pretty frozen, and then you can do either thing too, cook them or put them back in the freezer. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alan. We appreciate your sentiments.
We love you too.
Okay. I think we've pretty much hit our hour mark. let's see.
We appreciate being here, and I hope everybody will stay safe and keep eating, keep your vitamins and everything going in. The nutrients are really important.
Deborah, what's the hours for your farmers market?
Well, they vary, and the best thing to do, because we have different hours and we have Saturday, Sunday, Maryland, Virginia, go to our website, again, centralfarmmarkets.com, and you'll see all the hours, and you can get all the information, find out who the vendors are there and what's going on.
So are you both?
I'd also like to point out is that 2 of our markets go year round.
That's right. Thank you. So we will be there all winter, and dress warmly, come out. It's the best place to shop. You're not going inside, and you'll get some fresh air.
So do you have some, are they all in Maryland, or there's some in Virginia too?
No, we have 2 in Maryland and 1 in Vienna.
No.
So you'll see all of that on the website.
Okay, so everyone check out the website. And yeah, I think it's about time. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate all the questions and feedback that we've gotten. There's a lot of information. Was this your last slide, Sandra?
Yeah, there's one more, just to add some resources.
Okay.
And I just want to point out that this is one of the best books you can ever buy that will tell you about all the cuts of meat, where they come from, how to cook them. Adam Danforth is an award-winning author, James Beard Award for this book, and it has been absolutely invaluable to me as a meat producer. So it's a worthwhile investment if you want to purchase whole animals. And these are the 2 organizations I mentioned where people can go to find farmers.
One more other quick question. Have you seen a rise in sort of unusual parts of the meat, like the parts of the meat that people don't usually?
I am the woman that everyone comes to get things they can't get anywhere else. And I have sold to the ethnic communities for close to 25 years. And there is nothing I have not sold. And I love my customers for it. They have, in turn, have brought me some of the most amazing food that they've shared with me. Currently, I count customers from over 60 different countries. And, it's funny. People come up to me and they say, "Are you the lady I can get?" And then they explain to me what they want. And usually I can manage it for them one way or another. But yes, people love comfort food. There for a while, the big comfort food was uncured ham hocks.
Mm.
I normally I eat those. And tongue, tail, oxtail, which is mine. I never sell that at market. That's my treat. Just a liver. I'd never seen people buy liver before like that. And it was their comfort food. That's what they wanted. So yeah, it's
So you've seen like liver's been really popular lately, I guess. Huh?
Liver's been huge. I mean, I have customers, they'll come in and they'll say, "Do you have liver?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Just give it all to me." I'm like, okay. Yeah. I had one customer come to me a few weeks ago and they wanted tendons, That's not something I would normally even think about selling.
So Sandra, when do you go to the market? Are you at the market all the time? There's a question here. Where can we?
I'm at the market every Sunday in Bethesda from 9 to 1:30.
Okay, so every Sunday.
And that's the only farmers market I do because the rest of the time I do have to farm. I am the farmer.
Okay, so every Sunday from 9 to
1:30.
1:30 in Bethesda. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much. You've provided so much information for everyone. I think you've given them some great tips and educational information on what to do with butchering and how to work the market and things like that. So again, I'm very I appreciate everything you've done. So thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.